What do you think what do you think about the CISO role in the pandemic? I mean, I often ask, what do the CISO or how do the CISOs get a seat at the table, at the executive table? And I asked that often before the pandemic. And I heard a lot during the pandemic that CISOs, like the whole executive team, basically just turned to the CISO and said, help us through this. Like, how are we going to get out of this? And there wasn't any question. They were the leader in many cases for months as they got employees set up to work from home and making sure everybody was secure. But coming out of the pandemic, do you think that the role of the CISO has changed or, elevated, or what is your thought on that?
I think a lot of industries collectively have learned a lot of lessons, not just because of the pandemic, but primarily because of the actions of state actors and organized crime, or I should say crime organizations who have now turned to hacking and ransomware as a way of life.
Right. Business, yeah, running a business.
And I think everyone has learned some really hard lessons about the importance of having someone with a security mindset in the conversation. We've already seen the shift from security being considered a technology or IT discipline to security being the evolution of the IT discipline. And being able to take a security approach means that you understand everything that's happening in tech. You understand everything that's happening in an application with a network. And more importantly, you understand how the confluence of those things creates seams and pores that hackers like to take advantage of. The conversations around how to secure those things are executive level decisions. They can't be done in a vacuum. It's important for CEOs to embrace the security conversation because at the end of the day, they're held responsible. I have yet to see a CISO or a CIO or even a COO on television talking about, well, what happened to our company was. It's
Right.
always the CEO.
Yeah.
And I think now that CEOs are seeing that, they're saying to themselves, I better make sure that I've got someone in my ear who can help me understand what happened, when, why, and how to prevent and prepare. And so my hope is to see more organizations doing what my bank did. I have a relationship now where I am interfacing with the bank's CEO on an ad hoc basis. It's, sometimes just a text conversation, right? I'm involved with the board. I have the opportunity to sit in the strategy sessions, which have nothing to do with security. They're about banking and technology. But I'm sitting in those conversations, understanding where the bank is going so that I can create a security strategy to protect all that, right? And as we transition as a bank more into being tech focused, my role is to be able to raise a hand and say, hey, that's risky. Here's how we, mitigate that risk, or maybe we shouldn't go down this road and we should go in another direction. And so I think, CISOs have to be prepared to be multidisciplinary, be prepared to be able to transition the typical tech language into the base business language. And I think most importantly, have to understand every single in and out of the business or industry that they're in. Even if it means just researching or, getting articles or getting an education around it, whatever it takes. And so, I've pride myself personally, and now I understand how, banks manage net interest income, right? Mm-hmm. And how banks manage treasury operations and how money moves in and out of a bank, or how the Fed Reserve is involved in all those types of things. Understanding all of that helps me secure the organization better and be able to put a not so technical spin around the security elements so that everyone can understand and embrace it. And I never see any pushback. I think as soon as people feel like you're talking a language they don't get, that's where the pushback comes from.
Right. That's really interesting. I didn't think of the CISO role as being so interdisciplinary, but it really is.
It is.
And I didn't know that you had the psychology background by family experience, and I can tell that's played a big part too. Just the way that you're
Yeah.
talking, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you're likable guy, easy to understand, easy to talk to, and I think that's a big part of it. When you go through something like a pandemic, or equating to an incident response or an incident, you come out of it a different person, right? A different company. And we certainly did at Excellion. And it pulled us all together. And we had to understand. But it's interesting, the CISO really has to understand all the different business functions more so than almost anybody, except a CEO, really. But that's a really important point. But what would you suggest to a new, it could be either a new CISO, but a CISO taking over a new role? And I'm just curious, I've asked a lot of CISOs this. I'm just curious what your thoughts are, especially now that we've come through a pandemic. Things are different in the world. So what would you recommend to somebody starting a new role as a CISO for the first 90 days?
I think, believe it or not, the first thing that I would say is external. Find some peers. I think there's a lot of education and knowledge to be gained from talking to someone who's in the same boat, in the same situation. In the financial industry, it's great because we have these peer group associations that really are started by the banks so that they can, talk to each other in different areas. And there's a security one. And so I have, a few hundred folks that I can just lean on and say, hey, we came across this issue with this vendor. You're using them too. What have you dealt with? Right. And just being able to bounce ideas off of people. So that's number one. I think number two is align yourself with all of the members of the C-suite. Don't hermit crab it. Right.
Right.
A lot of times technical people, and I've been a CIO and a CTO in my past too. And, I will admit, the very first time that I was a CTO, I thought my job was to just kind of keep my head down and produce a good product, right? And so that's where my focus was. And I didn't really pay attention to the other facets of the business that intrinsically have an impact, but in your mind don't. So, conversations with marketing are important. Conversations with sales are important. Conversations with your finance group, very important. Conversations with, in my case, people like treasury, people like risk, people like our audit group, our regulatory teams. All of those folks are very important to have conversations with, because you want to be able to create a mental Rolodex for other people that you're in. That's when you get phone calls from them and they just want to bounce an idea off of you. Or, a lot of times I'll get the languages, I don't know if you're the right guy for this or not, but I wanted to, and then you can tell them, oh, I am the right guy, right? Or I'm not the right guy, but let's go get the right answer together. And now you're getting the answer too, right?
Right.
And those types of things just not only enhance your experience in being included in the conversation, but enhance the experience of others in dealing with you. Too many folks have, and this is my favorite analogy, too many folks have the idea in their heads that CISOs or security people are police, right? Our job is to police the internet, police the emails, police the social media, that's what we do. I think the best CISOs are fire chiefs, right? No one ever tells the fire department how to fight fires, right? Everyone expects the fire department to be proactive. Hand out smoke detectors, tell people, to do fire plans and exits and fire drills and that sort of thing. That's what a CISO should want to be, is a fire chief. I think not only do you get more respect in your organization because no one has it in their head that they can do your job better, but you also set the tone for everyone that he's here to prevent me from getting burned, as opposed to he's here to enforce the law. Right. It's a completely different mindset. It changes everything. And I think if you can set that tone in your first 90 days, you're guaranteed to have another 5,000 days. Right.
That's an amazing analogy, because absolutely everybody, when you think of firemen, everybody thinks, oh, they're not here to tell you what to do. They're here to keep you safe. That's
completely different mindset that people have. It's amazing how that works. But yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So what has surprised you most in your career?
State-sponsored cyber attacks. And the reason why that surprised me the most is because, you know, it's for whatever reason, with the exception of China, it's always the countries that don't necessarily have the resources to do something like that, right?
Yeah,
But they put all of their money into it, right? Like explain Belarus, for example, or the Philippines, right? Or Thailand, where we see attacks emanate from that are state sponsored, or even Iran, right? And you see these attacks from there, and you say to yourself, wow, they actually spent the time to get the education and build the infrastructure and create this, massive discipline, if you will, to be able to attack infrastructure and critical parts of other countries' operations. And that to me has been surprising. I always thought that it would just be an organized crime thing, but the state sponsorship is very interesting to me. It's very surprising.
At the beginning, you mentioned something about the business, like the cyber criminals are basically running a business. And I think I work for a cybersecurity company and I've been in the business for a while. And you think, what else could surprise you? But it seems like everybody's upping their game, the cyber criminals. But the thing I read this monthly or daily newsletter I get, and there was a quote that DarkSide made about the attack, colonial attack, pipeline attack. And just the tone of it and the message was basically they said, oh, we just do this and hand it out to companies to use. We didn't know that they were going to use it on a pipeline company. We don't tolerate those types of attacks. And I'm thinking, but they tolerate other attacks. Like that's their business. And they made $90 million before they were shut down.
Right.
I find that just like, that's shocking. That is so shocking to see it, a quote. It was quoted, blatantly quoted by this company, and they got shut down. I'm sure they're going to pop up some other place, some other way, but it's a business. And we collectively in the cyber community on the good side have to pull together to address it. It's otherwise we're not going to win. It's a challenging issue we face right now.
Yeah. It's very interesting because if you think about it, sort of like nuclear energy, right? It was first discovered and things were created around it for the purpose of creating clean energy, right? And then like everything else, it gets perverted into something else. But the folks who understood the physics behind it can't come back and say that they were shocked that you could turn it into a bomb.
Right.
You knew you could.
Right.
What I mean? So it's like it's a difficult pill to swallow, and seeing them actually come out with a statement was kind of funny to me. Like, hey, we're a legit company. No,
right. That's a good way to describe it. It was they were legitimizing their company.
Hey.
And I'd never seen that written like that. And I thought, wow.
Pretty bold.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. It tells you about where we are today, as a cyber society, right?
Right.
It's an interesting term.
Yeah. So I guess what do you see in terms of, I guess we've seen a lot of changes in cyber, especially over the pandemic. We've talked a little bit about them. A lot of people have been focused on zero trust, and it's an interesting topic. People interpret it in many different ways, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on zero trust and how that can protect an organization.
Well, the first part of what you said, I think, is really important. People interpret it in different ways. So, for me, the best IT is standards-based IT, right? I think we need to, at some point, develop a unified standard for zero trust, not only in its implementation and operation, but also in how we audit and review the controls to ensure that we're doing everything that we should be doing. It has a lot of different elements in it already, like role-based authentication and control, multiple factor authentication, the segmentation of networks. These are all things that people have done as sort of, part of the discipline in the long run anyway. But I do think that because there's so many different interpretations, one has to question whether or not people are truly implementing zero trust frameworks. For my money, the best thing that a company can do is remember the importance of small networks, of segmentation, micro-segmentation almost, if you will, because that limits your surface for the spread of the inevitable. And so if we accept the fact that we cannot prevent everything with security, right? As crude an example as it is, I always liken cybersecurity to birth control, right? We're around a 99.91% solution, right? There's another 8 or 9 or 0.8 or 9% that we just can't account for sometimes. And I think if we remember that in the back of our minds, and we do the mix of all of the smart things for the infrastructure, all of the smart things for prevention, keep our network small, minimize our attack surface as much as possible, have a good vulnerability management program, have a super sound phishing program where you educate your employees so that they know what a bad email looks like before they see it, and then the preventative measures to prevent those types of softwares from being able to come in the first place. If you do all of those things and then you have good planning and everything else, zero trust might not get you much further, right? On that 99.91%, right? It might get you a 0.01% in addition, right? But I think the real strength is the role-based authentication, micro-segmentation, and good program hygiene. That would be my opinion.
Okay, good. What's your advice to someone who's thinking about getting into cybersecurity, I should say, or if they're looking to advance in their career?
First, do it, because I think we need more people in the discipline.
Yeah.
Second, and I think this is the most important thing, you're going to learn more from the edge training companies and programs than you will from college level classes. I know a lot of universities are going to say boo hearing this, but I really do think that when you look at those like Cybrary and some of those other alternative education providers where they allow you to learn about different topics. I mean, even LinkedIn's library for LinkedIn Learning, pretty darn good in terms of the different topics that you can get and the learnings that you can get, but also build a lab for yourself. That is the one thing that I will say, late 90s, early 2000s, every IT person that I know was a super nerd and had a lab in their house. I had a rack in my house with several servers, and people were annoyed by the amount of heat that I was pumping out of my basement and the power that I was using, especially during the summer, right?
Right.
But it was important for me to have like my VM stack and all my different servers because that's how I learn. I think having a lab at home is extremely important. Being able to play around with, different cyber tools like Metasploit and being able to take like a Kali Linux package, for example, and test out different things, learning Burp Suite, those things. You can only do that hands-on. You can only effectively learn those things hands-on. And I think that if you're serious about a cyber career, get into that. And also look at your systems thinking. If you're a person who likes to know how everything is connected, you're going to be a good security person because that is the job. It's not the thing, it's everything that plugs into the thing. Right. I really think that for folks looking to get into the discipline, those are the best things to do, especially have your own lab and play around.
Very good. So just closing out, I always like to ask this question. I just, wonder where you and people in your role get inspiration. And I think sometimes you have to disconnect to find your inspiration. So what do you like to do when you're not in your CISO role?
The greatest role that I have is as a dad. I think that nothing gives you more a sense of the the raw power of a child's mind. Just a quick story to tell you. My kids, I have 3 younger boys. I have a 9-year-old and 2 4-year-old twins, and they love to play all over the house. And I asked my 4-year-old yesterday, I said, why do you always play in the living room? Like, you've got a playroom, there's the family room. Like, why do you always play in the living room? And he looked at me, and without even skipping a beat, he said, because we live to play, Dad.
Wow.
Right? When I heard that, I just didn't even know what to say. I still let them play in the living room then. I don't have an argument, right?
Right.
I just think that kids give it to you so straight. And I feel like if adults could just bring themselves back to that place, how much better would our world be, where we could just be straight with each other and there's no lenses and there's no, qualifying statements or political statements or anything. You just say it like it is, right?
Right.
So my kids, and then, I'm a football guy. I just discovered, much to my wife's chagrin, the spring league is actually a thing. So,
are you NFL or?
yeah.
Okay. Who's your team?
No,
Who's your team?
the Eagles.
Oh, the Eagle. Okay, that's right. Of course.
You can't live in the Philadelphia area.
That's true. True. Okay.
They'll kick you out. But and I found out about the spring league. She's very upset about that because now I'm watching all those games and it's fantastic. So I love football.
Awesome.
Always have and definitely always will.
Yeah. I like football too. I used to watch, I lived in San Francisco, and so I was a huge 49ers fan for years. I never really supported the Raiders very often, but I love the 49ers. But my mother is an avid basketball fan, and she loves the Warriors.
Oh.
And she lives in Southern California, but she loves the Warriors. And if there is a basketball game on and you call her, she will not pick up the phone. And she just like, that's it. So it's fun. I love actually, I love sports, and it's fun to hear people when they love sports too, but unfortunately for your wife, I know it's very time consuming on your side.
Your mom is lucky with the Warriors. They got Stephon Curry right now.
I know.
He's a big team, right? That dude is just too good.
I know. I went to a lot of Warriors games. I love basketball. I love going to get a hot dog, the big tall margaritas, and and we were so fortunate.
We don't have margaritas here at our 76ers games.
Oh.
No, it's just beer here.
You have to come to California.
That would be a California thing, man. Margaritas and cocktails. That sounds good.
Well, it was fun because when I was in San Francisco during the Giants era too, San Francisco Giants baseball, and it was so fun. My cousin used to play for the Giants, and he's now an announcer. So I used to listen to him as I was driving across the Bay Bridge to work. I would listen to him in the morning announcing or recapping the games and stuff. And so when Buster Posey came up and all that, and so for 3 years or 4 or 5 years. It was just sold out games, championships. It was so fun. And that's how I felt when I was going to the Warriors all the time.
Yeah.
It was great. So, but anyway, well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time today, and I know the audience is going to love it too. So with that, we'll close out our interview and hope to see you on a panel or somewhere in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And hit me up on LinkedIn anytime.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thank you.